Hi, I'm Rodney Peyton, and welcome back to this episode of Beyond the Gavel. Today brings a perspective that many practices will recognize, but few articulate with real clarity. I'm joined by Alex Perry. He's with Perry Calder Law in Pittsburgh, and he's a lawyer who's seen the profession from both sides of the divide, the intensity, the scale of elite corporate defense work, and now the precision and judgment required in plaintiff medical negligence and personal injury litigation. Alex began his career at one of the most demanding environments in law, working on high-stakes, multi-million-dollar litigation for major corporations. And that experience shapes how he now approaches cases for individuals who have suffered harm. He understands not only how cases are built, but how they are defended, dismantled, and tested under real pressure. So in this conversation, we're going to explore what real changes happen when a lawyer crosses that divide, that shift in responsibility, the difference in decision making, and perhaps most importantly, the discipline required to say no to the vast majority of cases that simply will not stand. We also examine how modern practice is evolving, how younger lawyers are engaging with AI, and how firms are managing volume versus quality. Why the structured screening is to become central to sustainable legal practice. This is a discussion about judgment, about restraint, and about what separates activity from strategy in medical legal practice. So I think you'll find it both practical and quietly thought-provoking. So Alex, welcome to Beyond the Gavel.
It's a pleasure to be here, Professor Payne. Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful having you today. And tell me, how did you get into law in the first place? Give us a bit about your background.
Sure. So I grew up in a house with a lawyer. My father was a lawyer, watched the impact he was able to make for injured individuals. He's owned his own medical malpractice firm for the better part of 30 years, probably. And as I went through school, I realized that the legal profession jived with my talents. Never was too much of a math or science guy, and took some classes in college, fell in love with the law, and ended up taking the leap and going to law school.
So what characteristics do you think were the ones that guided you towards it? You said I wasn't very good at science and things like that. What was it that you thought, this is what attracts me?
So I think for one, I just have a legal mind. I like writing. I like digging into facts and cases and thinking strategically. But two, also just seeing the impact that lawyers are able to make for their clients. I've seen countless cases that our firm and my father in particular have really given a family who's been devastated by a catastrophe a lifeline, and the justice that they've deserved. So those two things were driving factors for me.
So that's something about adding value to your community, adding value to other people. And that's very powerful, isn't it? Because it's the relationships that are important. And then you went to law school. How did you find that?
Law school, it's difficult, but I enjoyed it immensely. It really changes the way you think. I always say that any legal board should have, or excuse me, any company board should have a plaintiff's lawyer on it because really you just learn how to think differently in law school, and I found that experience really valuable.
What was it? What difference did you notice?
They strip things down for you in law school. At no other point in my life did I ever have to go home after classes and read 300 pages and evaluate facts and understand how a court is applying prior law and logic and things like that to make its determinations. And as you do that in law school, you just start to think differently. And I really have noticed that. I think about everything in the world in a much different way than I did before law school now.
Bit of fact versus opinion, isn't it, really? Instead of forming your opinion and then looking for the facts, you formed your facts and then opinion on those facts. I think that's a very, very important point that people need to pick up when they're coming into this profession, is that it's about the facts. And if it's you don't know the facts, and you ask the court to determine the facts, and then everything goes from that. Too often I see sometime with experts, they come in with an opinion, and if the facts don't meet it, they just throw the facts out. Yeah. And that's one of the problems with experts, I have to say, that I've seen. What have you seen?
No question. I mean, you've got to vet your experts very carefully because there are those experts out there that are just working for the money and they'll rubber stamp anything. And that's not really how we approach our cases. We want to determine the truth. If we send a case to an expert and they tell us there was no negligence, we might get a second opinion if we're really surprised by that, but we're looking for the truth. So I absolutely agree that the facts have to fit the standard and also the law.
Yeah, especially when you're doing contingency fee, which obviously a lot of you do. Um, you can bankrupt your, if it's not your company, you don't care, but you can bankrupt a company by taking on cases you shouldn't be anywhere near. And I think we've talked before that, very low numbers, like 10% of what walks in over your door is liable to be a case that's worth fighting, that's worth going for, and you can spend your time in that as opposed to the whole group of cases. But of course, that takes us towards differences in jurisdiction. Now, you did something very specific. You went to London, didn't you? Didn't you go and get some experience in the UK law?
I did. I worked for Edward Cumming, who's a barrister in London, just for a summer. It was an awesome experience. I learned so much from him. He's a brilliant guy, and I really value that experience for sure.
What sort of thing did you see he was up to that maybe triggered you and said, "Oh, that's a good one."
Well, for one, he's a very charming guy, and that matters. When you're negotiating cases, when you're working with other lawyers, that was a big thing that stuck out to me. Two, he takes a very um, holistic approach to his cases. He's always looking down the line, and he's in big stakes litigation. So all three of those things I found immense value in.
So you mean you don't want to be a Rottweiler all the time? You're not just snapping at people. I think that's a lesson for some of the young ones coming through is, a lot of times that is showing off. That's ego. And that usually exposes a big hole if you don't watch it. And you're right, it's about relationships because it's not just about this case, it's about the next case and the next case. And the relationships you've made with people you're going to see again.
No question.
And people have very long memories about what's gone on. So that was important, an important lesson you brought back with you. And then you went to corporate. How did that happen?
So I ended up at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and it's a very big, reputable school, and it feeds mainly into New York City big law. And I just honestly, I kind of fell into it. I got an offer at Skadden Arps, and it was too good of an offer to pass up. And I figured, hey, you know what? I'll give this a shot. I'm sure I'll learn great experience. So let's do it.
How did you get the offer?
So we have here in the United States on-campus interview process, and man, honestly, it was the most exhausting week of my life. I think I was doing 15 interviews a day at the law school, and I really clicked with the two folks who interviewed me at Skadden. Just really great, fun people who I thought alike with, and it was an easy decision to accept their offer.
So, you went to people, you found you clicked with them, you had similar values to them as far as you could tell from that. And there was again relationship building. We're coming back to the same thing, aren't we? It's relationship building. It's especially young people coming through. I mean, I bet a number of your school didn't bother their ear doing that,
That's
you
that's
know.
very that's very true, and I will tell you to this day, I still find that relationships inside a firm are a huge driver of culture and very important, and I think that's a really important piece to practice in a law firm.
Yeah. Culture beats strategy all the time. You can say you're going to do this, that, and the other thing, but if the culture's wrong, it's all going to go wrong. They'll say yeah, 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 and give you kind of lip service. But if the people aren't on board, they'll find some way of not being on board. Um, so you're right, and especially in a company, I'm sure your dad has seen it in his company as he's grown it to a big, big company in Pittsburgh. As he's grown it there, he realizes that it's about his staff, the culture within the organization, and that it's about relationships. And that is so, so important. So then, why did you switch? when did you decide? I suppose it's a bit obvious when your father owns part of the practice, but why did you switch then? When did you make that decision to switch from corporate to plaintiff?
Well, I always knew that in the back of my mind, I was thinking about coming back, but there were a couple of things. One, I'll say it offered me the chance to go from the war room to the living room. At the big firm, I'm behind the scenes, doing that kind of thing, supporting the partners. Now at Perry Calder Law, I'm sitting in living rooms with real families. I'm working on my own cases. I have real responsibility. So that was a huge aspect. The second was obviously the ability to work with my father was very unique. He's a fantastic lawyer. Having him as a mentor and somebody to lean on has been fantastic. And you can't really learn trial experience from a book. I can walk into his office. He's been doing it for 30 years and lean on him and pester him with my development. So that's been fantastic.
Isn't that so true? It's who coaches and who mentors you. And I mean, you have had people aside from your father, because anybody turning up and said, but you've had other people who have been your coaches and mentors. I mean, you weren't simply chucked in the deep end, were you? I mean, you didn't walk in one day and said, here's your caseload, do something, you're trained. Um, Talk me through how you were introduced and how you were brought along in your experience and made sure that everything was right, both for you and the plaintiff you were working for.
Yeah, sure. Well, for starters, I'll say I think all of this started with my time at Skadden. I worked for some really smart people, one in particular who was a trial lawyer. She took me under her wing, brought me onto her trial teams, and really gave me firsthand experience and invested in me, which made me want to invest back in her. And then when I got back to Perry Calder Law here, the same was true. I started small. I started on smaller auto cases, or I started getting integrated into cases. I would draft the first complaint. And then as I proved myself, I started getting more responsibility to the point where now I have my full Rolodex of cases. I'm obviously leaning on the partners for support, but I'm the ones taking all the depositions. I've been trusted to write some very important briefs for the firm. So it just kind of has been a integrated effort with me seeking support from the partners seeing that I can handle more responsibility, and then the partners opening those doors for me.
There's something in there you brought up too. It's about adding value before you ask for something. Nobody's going to help you just because you ask for it, unless obviously they have an alternative. It's their plaintiff and their practice. But when you add value to somebody, when you will do the donkey work, when you will go to them and they feel you're safe, that you will do the underneath work for them, then you find they're much more likely to help you, to give you more responsibility, and to be there for you. Isn't that right? So it's about adding value before you ask for something.
Completely agree. That's a good way to put it.
And that again is something which sometimes I have to say the entitled generation comes along and say, well, I'm entitled. I'm working here. They should be giving me this and they should be, and why am I not being paid more and all the rest of it? Instead of saying, how can I add value to this firm to make myself invaluable to the firm so that they see what I do, as opposed to, well, I'm here and you're supposed to pay me.
No question.
It's 5 o'clock now for I'm out. Uh, oh dear, the traffic's a bit heavy, so I'll be in late. And anyway, I have to get coffee. Uh, it's funny how, although that sounds silly, that happens so often. And I'm sure you have seen it in people who have come along with you. You've looked at firms and you've seen who get on in firms and who doesn't.
I have. I mean, in every experience I've had, the people who put in the hours and work the hardest and are looking for work are the people who are rewarded.
Exactly. And rewarded not necessarily in money, but rewarded in being given things to do, given interesting cases, allowing to take the first seat, all that sort of stuff
It,
comes from you giving value in the first place. And then people see what you're worth.
that's right. And the way I like to look at it is the reward for good work is more work and more experiential work. And that's how you develop as a lawyer. And I've tried to live my practice by that, and it's really paid off for me.
Well, I think that's a powerful lesson for people coming in. Now then, we talked about the number of cases. How did you get into medical malpractice? I know your dad's, but what attracted you to that?
So, yeah, I kind of fell into it given that my father had been running a medical malpractice firm for many years. It's a very interesting field for me, and
So
you
was
can
that
make.
his whole niche? Was that what he was concentrating on?
Yes, he has been for many years, and to this day, we specialize in medical malpractice. We do handle catastrophic personal injuries like auto accidents and things, but our specialty is medical malpractice. And so when I saw what he was doing and the opportunity I had to make an impact for the community, it was a no-brainer.
So that's something you really enjoy. And you've already expressed that you like working with people and people who are vulnerable and helping them through. But then there's this thing, I mean, people come to you and we've already talked about the numbers that come in over the door. And for you, that's considerable numbers. I mean, the thousands, but you can't take them all on. And in fact, the majority are going nowhere. You need to concentrate in those cases that you're able to get a result or a decent result for. So how do you do that determination as to whether you're going to actually take on a case, especially with contingency fees, and put your back into one case instead of the other, especially when the majority you're not going to take on? How do you make that decision?
That's exactly right. It's frankly a full-time job for several people in our firm to make that determination. We screen 2,000 to 3,000 cases a year, which we accept 50 of. What happens in our office is we have a full-time nurse who takes all the calls. She will then present the cases to the partners, sometimes with associates. The partners will listen to the story, reject 90+% on the spot is just not having any potential. And then the last 10% that do, we order medical records. Those then will go for a in-depth review by our full-time in-house physician who will evaluate the merits. Most of those are unmeritorious. And then the last layer is sending them out for external expert review, and we lose a significant portion of those on expert review too. So it's a multi-layered process, and the end result is about 50 cases. And you're exactly right. It's really important for a contingency firm to be selective, not only because you don't want to give potential clients a false set of hope, but also because you're working on a contingency fee basis.
So it's interesting. What sort of time do you think is involved? Is this a lot of time and effort, especially to try and rule them out? You give us you have a nursing colleague. Does that nursing colleague put the notes together, get the chronology for you, that sort of thing, or do they make decisions?
So the nurse takes the intake, spends probably 30 minutes to an hour with each call that comes in, puts
Mm.
together a brief chronology of the case, and then goes and presents every single case to one of the partners. It is
So
an
2,000 cases or more get presented to the partners.
can you say that again?
So 2,000 cases or more in a year get presented to the group, and then what happens?
That's exactly right. And then they will reject on the spot a significant portion of those, given their experience. They know what's negligence just based on the facts. And then the next step is to take it to the in-house physician who will work with the partners, and he will write in-depth memos on what happened. Either I recommend rejecting this case, I recommend accepting it for expert review. Here's why. So it is an immense amount of time, no question.
So they take a lot of time over that, and that's yeah, and what he's doing is triaging, isn't that right? So you have a medical expert triage, and they look at it and give you. Now they're not telling you what to do; they're giving you a medical opinion based on which you make your decisions.
That's exactly right. And the other part of this, Professor Payton, is that it's valuable for our prospective clients because even the cases that we can't help with, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do. We can at least give the families of those victimized an explanation for what happened.
Yes.
A lot of times people call us and they say, "Hey, my dad died. He went in for this procedure. I don't know why. I think something wrong might have happened." Well, at least in that case, we're able to go back to them and say, "You know what? I'm really sorry this happened. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to help you because it just was something that was a known complication or something to that effect, but at least we can give some people peace of mind."
Isn't it interesting why they have to come in those numbers to you for a second medical opinion?
It is, yeah.
They're actually turning up in a law firm for a second medical opinion because sometimes it's the doctors who don't have the best communication skills. And of course, they're hurt, they're vulnerable, the outcome was not what they wanted or expected. And they just want to know answers. And possibly from somebody independent or seemingly independent so that they get two views, but they're asking for a second medical opinion and they're expecting you to put your time into getting it.
That, that's true. That's a cost of doing business, and it's a service that we offer to the community.
Isn't that isn't that interesting? Whoever taught you in medical school that your job was to give second medical opinions?
Yeah, they don't teach you that.
No, no, but that is not the truth. And then you learn more about it. The trouble with medicine is it changes so quickly. I mean, medicine is multiplying every day. There's more stuff and more information, and some of it stand the test of time, and some of it won't. Um, the latest and greatest may not be the greatest. And what we always say, what is gospel now ain't gospel in 5 years' time.
No
It just
question.
when it gets into practice, it isn't. But people can be hurt in the meantime, totally unintentionally. But that's the way it goes down. So you're a young guy coming through now. So where do you think AI fits? Where do you think AI is in there, and where do you think AI would be a problem?
So I will tell you, at our firm, we like to say that AI stands for attorney intelligence because it is a fantastic tool for efficiency, but it is a supplement, not a substitute. You can have the most powerful engine in the world, but if the person who's using it doesn't know how to use it and how to use it to supplement their case, it's going to lead you to the wrong destination.
Yeah,
So
it's giving you that the facts that we talked about, but opinion and what you're going to do about it. There's the medical opinion, and then there's your opinion as a lawyer about what the art of the possible is in taking this through court. Very interesting you say that. As I told you recently, I was up in Machu Picchu there. And if you look at how the Incas set up those temples, when you see the craftsmanship, it's like the Temple of the Sun. I mean, they're huge blocks of stone, beautifully carved, beautifully fitting together without cement, without anything else holding it. And it stands there rigid as a test of time to the skill of the person who handled the hammer and the chisel, the tools. You
yeah,
can see other places built today that are falling to pieces because of the lack of skill in the people who have the hammer and the chisel. So you're right, it's a tool. And it's the skill of the person using the tool. And that I think is where people, in your age, are coming to the fore because you're being brought up with the tool. And as you say, attorney intelligence, it's your intelligence linked to that, powered by that, that will help you use it effectively and efficiently because it is a very efficient way of doing certain things. Um, but your background and knowledge base is what will make it work for you. So if you were to talk to, I was going to say your younger self, maybe somebody in school who wants to come into law, what advice would you give them?
So I think the best advice I would give to my younger self would be to work hard, prove yourself, and that will open doors for you. As we talked about earlier, if you put in the effort, you are going to be rewarded. You are going to get opportunities. and those opportunities are going to open doors for you.
And that work can mean putting yourself out, like going to London, like going to a major firm that'll sit on you, doing different things and feeling uncomfortable. All learning comes from feeling uncomfortable.
I
If
agree.
you don't feel uncomfortable, then it's the same thing over and over again. And that's where people get bored in PI cases, sometimes in road traffic accidents. Same thing, same cookie cutter. Yeah. But what you're doing is you're putting yourself in an uncomfortable position where you have to learn and to grow. And that's the power of putting yourself into that. I'm sure you felt very uncomfortable first time walking into a major company and working for them. I mean, you knew they were looking at you and saying, well, what's this guy going to be like? And there are others who refuse to do that. And the entitled mob that think, well, I've been through law school, said that's not the way it works. You need to go and be uncomfortable. That means you don't know. And the problem is you don't know what you don't know. And it's only by being open, admitting that, asking for coaching and mentoring, like you've said you've done, and having people senior in the firm who will give you that coaching and mentoring and gradually giving you your head. That's where you're going to grow. And then as your experience comes into it, that's where your practice does. And then you've got to know the new tools, which people long in the tooth like me are wondering what they're about. Your father probably wondering what it's about, but you have to make up your own mind and use the tools.
Agreed. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself.
So, look, this has been fascinating. I think it's fascinating for the young people, coming through. I think for older people looking at that, it begins to dawn on them that they have their job is to educate the next generation. Their job is to coach and mentor. And having people like you come in who are so open, who are prepared to add value, that's what makes the job worthwhile. And that's what makes us want to teach. So you in your turn, I know, will start teaching and do the same. Have you been giving talks? Have you gone back to your alma mater and offered or
So I have not been back to the alma mater. I'm actually speaking at a seminar next month for the first time on finding sources of law. So trying to lean on areas where I believe that I am, can add value to this particular one is paralegals and young lawyers. So I'm looking forward to getting into more of that. Obviously, as the more established you get, the more opportunities you get to do that kind of stuff. So, um, looking forward to that in the future.
well, this has been a great conversation. I have really loved, speaking to you today and going through this stuff with you today. I think you've come up with very great insights, and things that will stand to everybody that's listening. There's over 1,000 people listening to this each time, some running errands, some, in the gym or whatever. But there are points there that are so valuable. And thank you so much for spending your time with me today.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.